With me now, Portland Police Chief Bob Day. Nice to have you here. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Portland's had a rough few years when it comes to homelessness, open-air drug use, and crime. It does seem like there's been a shift, though, in a positive direction, and that's happening right now. How would you describe Portland?
Yeah, I do believe that there is a renaissance or renewal that's happening. Been here my whole life, graduated David Douglas High School, love the city, have watched it obviously transform and grow over the many years. But you know, we did go through a period of struggle, 20, 21, 22, that I see us coming out of in a very positive way. And I would describe Portland as awake, that we see a large number of people coming and engaging in civic affairs that maybe we hadn't seen historically, and I think that's making a difference.
Over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of focus on shootings, homicides. Fortunately, we're seeing that downward trend continue. I do understand there's been a bit of an uptick in an issue with property crimes, burglaries and car prowls, stuff like that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so obviously coming out, as I said, some of those tougher years, we saw a real spike in violent crime. And the primary role of law enforcement is always the preservation of life. So we're always going to focus first and foremost on life safety. And when you go from 30 some odd homicides a year to over 100, when your fatal crashes spike in the 60, 70, 80s number, those are just unacceptable. Those are lives lost. And given the limited amount of staffing and resources, we had to make some intentional, difficult choices about where we were going to focus our efforts. And so the emphasis over the last several years has been around the reduction of violent crime, which I'm proud to say is happening, although still at an unacceptable level. We still are almost 100% higher in the number of shootings as we were in 2019, but we have seen double-digit decreases the last couple of years. So we're making some progress. But that obviously led to the neglect of some of our emphasis on property crimes. And we see that reported regularly. We hear that regularly, that homeowners, business owners, are really frustrated. And so we're trying to make that a point of emphasis here in 25 and going into 26. More of an awareness and a strategy around property crimes.
What do you see as the biggest public safety issue in Portland today?
Yeah, it's really, I talk a lot of one of my primary goals. We have 3 primary goals in the Police Bureau. 1 is transforming the dynamic between the police and the people we serve. Number 2 is reducing crime and the fear of crime. And number 3 is organizational growth and development. I think the greatest public safety challenge we face in the city of Portland today is actually around the fear of crime. Because of the success and the hard work of the Police Bureau and our community partners and city leadership, we are seeing a trend in crime going down. But the historical harm that's occurred, for example, we had 1,000 cars a month stolen in January of 2023. That number today is less than 400. But that's a major impact. Still, even 400 is too many. The drug crisis and the fentanyl on our streets had a huge impact on loss of life, deterioration of quality of life, livability issues. I would say that's, obviously very significant. But this holistic lack of sense of safety that Portlanders experience, we just saw in the Insight survey that came out this past week, continues to be a primary driver of how we show up in the public space. And so we are combating actual crime and the issues around crime, but we're also trying to restore a sense of public safety that will garner the involvement of Portlanders in their city.
You're talking about the perception that people have about crime in Portland.
Right.
In addressing that, I guess it seems is a little bit out of the Police Bureau's hands, but what can you do to address that issue, the perception that crime is where it was a couple of years ago?
Right. So a couple things. I mean, one, we have to stay diligent in our enforcement efforts and our crime reduction plan, which we released last year. So hoping that City Council will support that in the upcoming budget. It is an additional cost, but it does make a difference. We have seen when we are able to address street takeovers, for example, and be proactive and intentional in our interdiction there, then they don't become so violent and problematic. Other areas where we can interdict definitely contributes to that sense of safety. So the Police Bureau demonstrating a responsiveness to community concerns is number 1 in terms of challenging that perception. And number 2 is really messaging that to our leaders and to our community. So We are all very intentional, myself included, in trying to be out in the public, in areas and places that are not crisis-oriented, where we can have relationships, conversations, and pass on the message that we are engaged, we are addressing some of these issues, and we are seeing some results.
There have been some changes over the last couple of years around state law and open-air drug use. Are your officers on the streets seeing an increase or a decrease in open-air drug use? What are you hearing from them?
I think that we are seeing a little bit of a decrease. I would not say it's at a level that's acceptable. We are participating with the Multnomah County Deflection Program and with our behavioral health partners, trying to minimize the amount of possession cases that wind up in the criminal justice system. I do believe that there needs to be alternatives for simple possession cases as rather than just jail, but that is an option, that is a component to it. We have made a really strong emphasis since the first of the year around the dealing and the dealing of it more than the possession of it. So we're seeing some productivity there and some decrease in the dealing. But fentanyl is a really horribly addictive drug, and I don't know of very many people whose personal lives haven't been touched either by a family member or somebody else who's either addicted or has lost their life, unfortunately. So it's a challenge for us versus our traditional approach maybe to policing in around drug enforcement.
Fentanyl has really exploded on the scene over the last, it seems like, 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. What kind of dent are your officers making in the fentanyl, in the use and distribution of it in Portland?
Yeah, I would argue that we kind of got a little bit caught flat-footed by fentanyl. I worked through, the crack epidemic and heroin and cocaine and saw a lot of different methamphetamines, saw a lot of different trends. But fentanyl came on the scene with such a vengeance, and its addictive properties, its easy availability. A pill is very small, easy to conceal. It's cheap. All of these factors sort of upended our traditional approach around enforcement. Really, it just kind of took off like wildfire. And it came at a time when the city was already reeling from other areas of violent crime, the passage of Measure 110, the decriminalization. All of those factors really just compounded the challenge. I do think that we are seeing some efforts, particularly around our interdiction with dealing. We have made a number of large seizures, and I added last year to our narcotics unit the ability, additional staff, so we could increase our ability to really pursue farther along the line of the dealing. So rather than just getting somebody on the street, we take that person into custody. If they're willing to work or talk to us, then we work up the chain. And we've been able to address some organized crime details that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise by moving additional resources into our investigations.
I talk to a lot of people in the city, and one thing they say about when it comes to the police is they want to know about the work you and your officers are doing. They feel like it lets them know, but it also lets these bad actors know what's being done to stop them. What are you announcing today at 1 p.m. in regards to fentanyl?
Yeah, so we spent a significant amount of time in the first of the year partnering with multiple agencies. The one thing we know to be true about crime, and particularly drugs, is it doesn't stop at city borders, right? It's not beholden by state and county laws, borders. It really travels up and down the I-5 corridor. So we have partnered with the FBI, with the Drug Enforcement Administration, with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, with the U.S. Attorney's Office, with the District Attorney's Office, and really made some significant seizures and interdiction and arrest, and put some cases together that sent a really strong message to the more organized programs in the state around drug dealing. I think we're seeing that benefit by the decreased amount of seizures we're seeing on the street, because we were able to get larger amounts more upstream.
So part just sharing the message of what's been done.
Right.
Staffing's been a big issue, certainly since 2020 when there was that uptick in resignations and retirements. It seems like despite all the hiring you've been able to make over the last couple of years, it's been hard to make progress on that bottom line number. How short is the Police Bureau today in staffing?
Yeah, we are authorized 877 positions for officers. And we have about 780 to 790 today, give or take. And yes, staffing has continued to be a significant challenge for us. Portland, state of Oregon has the fewest number of officers per capita in the union. So the agencies in the state of Oregon are all competing for very precious bodies. And yet, you know, last year was our third highest hiring year in a decade. We hired 74 people last year, maybe 72, but we hired in the mid 70s, but we actually only gained about 3 because we lost 60 to 70 in retirements, rough numbers. We are added to our recruitment. We've added a recruiter. We are aggressively pursuing social media advertising. You can see us advertising in the airport and other places. And then also we have monthly one-day workshops, hiring workshops, where people can come and they can take the test, they can sign up, they can practice the physical agility portion of it. And we're seeing an increased amount of response in that. The last couple of months has seen some of our highest participation than we've seen in years. So we are really being aggressive in our approach for recruitment, but it's not just about recruitment, it's also about retention. Police Bureau has a very strong wellness program. We are investing heavily in our current members, both sworn and non-sworn, our professional staff and our officers, with an intent to try and keep people around longer, to be able to build up that reserve so we don't see quite as many people going out the door. And that is bearing fruit here in 2025. Our separations, our monthly separations, are down from where they were in 23 and 24.
We've seen some protests popping up, especially since this new administration took over in Washington. Anecdotally, things seem different than 2020. What are some things the Bureau is doing differently to handle these large crowds and keep them so far mostly peaceful?
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the learning that PPB's done over the years. And as we look back, particularly 20 and 21, which were such high volume years around demonstrations, and really unique. I mean, nobody in the country faced what Portland faced for those multiple months of rioting and disorder. And there's certainly things that Portland Police Bureau did well, and there were certainly things Portland Police Bureau could have done better. And we have spent the last couple of years, we began with an independent report that was done, and we've adopted a lot of recommendations that came from that. We recently entered into an agreement with Professor Stott, who's a British expert and professor out of London. We've actually done some teaching and training with the team in London. He has come here and really provided us a new perspective, an international perspective on crowd and crowd behavior. We developed last year our dialogue officers. These are officers that are specifically trained to do extensive outreach prior to the event or even on the day of the event. They wear a white shirt so they're easily distinguishable in the crowd, and we make every effort we can prior to any of these events to contact organizers, to be available for questions, to support, to make sure that the event can proceed and the message can be heard, but also done in a way that's safe for everyone. And so I think those are just a few. We also reinvested in our rapid response team, and we had a tremendous amount of interest in that. So we are training now once a month our rapid response team, which is an extensive investment on our part. New equipment. We have a softer look, I would say, and yet still preparing, and the officers are safe and protected, but it's a different approach, uniform style. These were recommendations that came from the community, that came from organizations that we've adopted, and I think we're seeing some of the fruits of that now.
While Portland is a sanctuary city in a sanctuary state, the immigrant populations in this city are seeing the law enforcement crackdown nationwide and might be fearful. What is the message to the immigrant population in Portland from you?
Yeah, we have spent a great deal of time, variety of groups, and myself personally and our team, messaging to them that, we are adhering to state legislation, state law, which prohibits local law enforcement's involvement with immigration. And this has been on the books for many, many years. So this is really not something new to the Portland Police Bureau. We do not, seek immigration status. We don't seek the nation of origin, any of those kind of things in our contact with folks, and we don't share that information with others if it's provided to us anyway. So we have really done a lot of messaging internally and externally, making sure that our members are aware of where the boundaries are, putting up really good, strong guardrails with our federal partners. I am in regular communication with our federal leadership here in Oregon, federal law enforcement leadership here in Oregon. I have a great relationship with Homeland Security, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, with DEA, FBI, et cetera. They have been very responsive, very engaged, and they understand the rules and expectations that I have and that I work with in both for the state and for the city. And there's been really seamless ability to communicate and share information, but understand our various roles. And our role is not to participate in any type of immigration enforcement. And we're just emphasizing that over and over again. And, you know, recognizing that, you know, there's more than just one group in the city that's impacted. We have immigrants from around the world that are facing and rightfully so concerned about some of the actions they're seeing. So we're trying to step into multiple different cultures and organizations and message the same thing.
It is budget time in Portland. The Police Bureau, along with other public safety agencies and other bureaus in the city, were asked to submit budget cuts. The Bureau did that. What kind of cuts did you submit? Proposed cuts, I should say.
Proposed cuts that it would really just come down to reducing personnel. I mean, at the end of the day, Portland Police Bureau is woefully understaffed for what it needs to serve a city this size. And 10 years ago, our authorized strength was 1,035. Today, as I said, it's 877. So, you know, prior city councils have tried to find a way to balance the budget on the backs of the Police Bureau in the past, and it's always in the reduction of officers, including 2021 when there was $27 million removed from the Police Bureau budget, as well as 80 some odd positions removed from the Police Bureau budget. So anything we put forward is just more cuts to officers, which is a reduction in service. And the reason that's a reduction in service is because everybody comes through the organization the same way. You start your role in the Portland Police Bureau on the sworn side as a police officer. And so it's one thing to say, well, we could cut this position or this position or this position. Ultimately, it's going to translate to a reduction in officers providing that core basic service to community. So when I was asked to propose the 5% and 8%, I believe it was, cuts, it really just comes down to a number of officers.
What do you think the biggest challenge is facing the Bureau right now?
It's clearly around hiring and recruitment. I could not be more proud of how our members are continuing to show up both in the sworn staff and in our professional staff. And yet we continue to struggle to get people in the door. Now, this is a national phenomenon. I was recently in Philadelphia and Chicago talking with police leaders and police officers, and they have, you know, 5,000 Philadelphia police officers, 8,000 Chicago officers, and they're still struggling to hire. So, you know, it's all contextual. But and the challenge to hire is not just a police problem. We're seeing this in organizations and businesses across the state. But we really need to do a better job of getting people to apply, and then developing them, and then having them stick around. And I think that's going to be our focus. One of our primary focuses going into this next year is how do we build upon that while we have a system that we know does allow for retirement and other alternatives as well.
Let's talk about street takeovers. They're happening. They're very public on social media. The public sees them. What is the Police Bureau doing to combat these events?
Yeah, the innovative approach that PPB is taking is really becoming a leader in this interdiction effort. And when they first were happening a couple of 3 years ago, just felt overwhelming. You know, we'd see the Fremont Bridge shut down, or 102nd and Gleason shut down, or North Portland is a common place where they gather. And just really all credit goes to the team that began to look at ways to try and interrupt that behavior even before it starts, or if it does start. So there's a couple of things. One, we really marshal, it's a resource-intensive effort. But the use of our airplane gives us a literal bird's eye view. So this reduces the number of pursuits we have to participate in, but it allows us to apprehend the person at a later date because the plane can follow them for much longer than they're going to be able to drive. So that is a big lift. We've come up with enforcement strategies that I won't share here, but they are working around interventions like pursuit intervention techniques and the use of our stop sticks, which poke the tires, et cetera. And so we have approach there. We also try to be where we get groups before they get really large, so we try to intervene earlier and more often. And then last year, I believe it was last year, but recently the state legislature passed legislation where we can now seize vehicles, and those are turned over for forfeiture. And we know how important these cars are to these folks, and so taking their vehicle, either impounding it because of the reckless drive and the behavior, or maybe going through the entire forfeiture process where they lose it permanently, I think is starting to send a strong message as well. And despite the fact that we continue to see these, they have been at a decreased number. And I'm hopeful that we continue to set the tone, as we've seen some pop up earlier this spring, that will discourage more from happening in the summer months.
I see these events, and sometimes we hear that the police were not able to break them up at a certain time. I think people in the public see that as well and wonder why they're allowed to continue sometimes, why police don't step in and break them up. Can you explain from an officer safety perspective why that happens sometimes?
Right. Well, I mentioned earlier, our number one priority is life safety, and that's life safety for everyone. It's not just life safety for the officers or life safety for the suspect, but we also have to take into consideration all of the risks posed to the community. And we know that a lot of these participants in particular, they behave with reckless abandon. And there are plenty of stories out there where they, take off and drive at a high rate of speed and end up killing or injuring somebody down the road that doesn't even have any police involvement. So we are very mindful of the fact that if we're going to take on the responsibility of managing this event, then we're taking on a lot of additional risk. And we want to make sure that we're properly equipped and prepared to do so. And both for the safety of the officers, but safeties of the people doing the driving, but also safety for the greater community. And, everything we do requires an evaluation of risk. And we know that we can never eliminate risk, but our job is to try to mitigate risk at the highest level. And I understand the frustration. I experience that as well when I see these things and I'm told, hey, Chief, we did what we could do at the time, but we couldn't do it as well and as effectively as we want. And not to go back to the broken record, but a lot of that has to do with resources. And some of these events are spontaneous, and we get caught shorthanded. For those that we're aware of and have any kind of lead up to information, then we always try to be intentional and progressive and get staff in place to be able to take them on.
Deadly crashes have remained high in Portland over the last few years. Drivers certainly have their own responsibility in changing the way they drive to make our roads safer, but what are your police officers doing to make the roads safer for drivers?
Yeah, so several years ago when resources were needed, we collapsed our traffic division. I think that was a huge loss. Our traffic division has such a high level of expertise in being able to intervene and manage our traffic highways, our roadways. We saw a steep decline in DUI arrests. We saw a huge increase in fatal crashes and serious critical injury crashes. So we've reinstated our traffic division, and we have a morning and an afternoon shift, so we have a more robust presence out there, a group of officers that are just focused on traffic. Traffic's interesting because it's one of the very real, tangible things that you can impact through enforcement and presence. If we put a police car on the side of the road, people are going to slow down. Everybody's going to slow down. It's just human nature. I drive a police car and I slow down when I see a police car on the side of the road. So the more visible we can be, and even if we're not taking enforcement in terms of citations, just when you see a police car have somebody pulled over, it's a reminder to drive appropriately. So our increased use of the traffic division, we're also using officers and rotating through our traffic division because we can't be at the size we'd like, but we can cross-train officers. So they may go to the traffic division for 30 days and go back to a precinct. Now they have that expertise. So we're seeing that translate into other areas of the city. I think that's a major portion of it. And then it's an education piece in working with PBOT, working with ODOT, and working with our city partners. I think that also plays a role in being able to reduce traffic injuries and deaths when we can look at the structure, the dynamic, the environment, the design of that.
You came out of retirement to come back as chief at a transition period for the city and for the police bureau. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I feel like I remember you saying you weren't going to take the job permanently, but that changed recently. What is your vision for the bureau? You talked about why you made that decision to stay. What's your vision for the bureau?
Yeah, I just this morning was driving in thinking about the fact that it'll be July 1st before I know it. And when I signed on, 22 months seemed like an eternity, and I was really explicitly clear that I wouldn't be here past July 1st. But really, my vision for the Bureau has grown since I started. You know, I came back with a belief that I could help at a pivotal time and step into a gap when it was needed, and I was honored that Mayor Wheeler and then Chief Lavelle asked me to be that person, and really grateful for that. I love the city and I love the Police Bureau, and thought, okay, maybe a stabilizing presence as we enter into the final year of Mayor Wheeler's term and enter this new form of government. But what's really surprisingly to me transpired over the last year is seeing the, as I mentioned at the start of this, the renaissance of the renewal that's happening in the city of Portland that I believe is being led or challenged by law enforcement in partnership with so many others. We are seeing so many folks come forward and engage and want to see Portland be healthier. And my vision for the Police Bureau is that we will grow into that we will grow into that expectation that Portlanders have of us. Portlanders want to have a relationship with their police. That has been made clear to me time and time again. And so my passion is to try and create that space and that time and that awareness so that we can have this ongoing relationship with all of us as a community. I've stepped away from the term, you know, police in the community, police in the community. We are the community. Portlanders are, Portland Police is the community. You know, we're City and Portland employees. We give thousands and thousands of hours a year and sacrifice a great deal to be a part of our community. And I think that's coming to fruition in a way that I didn't even expect, both because of the participants of so many people, the desire to see Portland be better, and the opportunity lays ahead of us. I'm excited about it. I will, because I am can be a bit of a pessimist at times. I don't know where this is going to end. You know, I always say that you know, the future isn't necessarily entirely clear to me, but what I see happening and transpiring right now motivates me to want to stick around to see how the story winds up. So I'm going to be here for a little while longer.
And the future is not entirely up to us either.
Absolutely.
Portland Police Chief Bob Day, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Appreciate it.